In April 1994, a Hutu woman in rural Rwanda hid 7 Tutsi neighbors inside her home for 91 days while the genocide raged around her. A single clay waiter dug on a packed dirt floor, the only sound the scratching of a child's fingernails against the wooden plank beneath it. H.O. did one woman hold the line against a systematic killing machine, and what happened to the 7 people she saved? Agathe Uwimana was 43 years old when the radio began broadcasting hate. She lived in a mud brick house on the edge of a village in Kibuye province, western Rwanda, a place where Hutu and Tutsi families had shared farmland and market days for generations. Her husband had died 2 years earlier from a fever, leaving her alone to work the small plot of beans and cassava that kept food on the table. She had no political connections, no weapons, no army training, just a house with a narrow back door and a root cellar beneath the kitchen floor, the kind of ordinary home that held no power and attracted no attention. The radio messages were specific and relentless. Lists of names read by announcers with cold precision. Coordinates of homes marked for destruction. The Interahamwe militia moved through the countryside in blue trucks, distributing machetes and issuing orders door to door, telling every Hutu household that Tutsi neighbors were enemies to be eliminated. On the 3rd morning of the killings, Agathe heard her neighbor Jean-Baptiste pounding on her front gate. His face was wet with sweat and terror. He had overheard the militia was coming for him next. He was Tutsi. He begged her to open the door. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely unlatch the gate himself. Agathe pulled the heavy bolt and pulled him inside. She did not speak. She simply closed the door and turned the lock. Within hours, 3 more neighbors appeared at her gate. A grandmother named Celestin, a young man named Emmanuel, and a mother with an infant wrapped in a torn cloth. Then 2 more from the next valley, walking fast with nothing but the clothes on their backs.
Are you all right? Let me help you.
By nightfall, 7 people were huddled in Agathe's kitchen, pressed against the walls, breathing in silence, not daring to look at each other. Agathe moved through the house with a quiet authority that belied the fear clawing at her chest. She divided the food she had, cassava, dried fish, a single bag of sorghum into portions so small they barely sustained hunger. She told everyone to stay low and quiet. The root cellar would be their refuge if the militia came searching. She showed them the hidden entrance behind the firewood rack, a trapdoor she had covered with a woven mat years ago, long before any of this had ever seemed possible. The first search came on day 4. 2 Interahamwe fighters kicked open the front gate and marched up the path with boots that thudded against the packed earth. Agathe opened the front door herself, smiling, holding a bowl of ugali. They asked if any Tutsi were sheltering here. She said no, her voice steady and her eyes lowered. They looked through the main room, saw only her alone, and left. She heard their boots fade down the road, and then she turned and whispered to the 7 people behind the kitchen wall, "Stay. Breathe low. Do not move." Grace, the 7-year-old girl among the hidden, could not stop trembling. Her small body shook so violently that Agathe pressed her own hand over the girl's mouth to muffle the sound. The child's fingernails scraped against the wooden floor, a tiny, relentless scratching that seemed to fill the entire house. That was the sound Agathe would remember for the rest of her life, the sound of a child trying not to be heard while soldiers searched the rooms above her. For 3 weeks, the pattern held. Militia patrols came every few days, sometimes twice a day. Agathe developed a system that became ritual. She would leave the front door open during the daylight hours, appearing alone, performing the routines of a solitary widow. She hung laundry on the line. She swept the path. She let the chickens roam free so the house looked occupied and ordinary, a home with nothing to hide. At night, she fed the hidden family in the kitchen, speaking only in whispers, boiling water for tea to mask the smell of cooking. Emmanuel, the young man among the hidden, could not sit still. He wanted to fight back, to join the RPF forces advancing from the north. Agathe refused. She told him the house was the only weapon he had. "Your life is the only ammunition," she said. Stick. On day 31, the militia came back with a different unit, men who knew the village, men who had traded with Agathe at the market for years. They recognized her face. One of them, a man named Pontien, stepped inside and looked around the kitchen with a suspicious eye. Agathe's heart stopped. She kept her face calm. Pontien pointed at the firewood rack and asked what was behind it. Agathe lifted the mat and showed the root cellar entrance. She said it was where she stored her harvest. Pontien stared into the dark hole, his eyes searching. She placed a clay pot at the opening and told him the sorghum was fermenting inside. The smell of grain filled the air. Pontien shrugged, laughed, and left. That night, Agathe told the 7 hidden people they needed to move. The militia knew the house. She could not protect them there anymore. She led them through the banana grove at the back of her property, down a steep slope to a cave she had known since childhood, a shallow rock overhang hidden by vines and tall grass, a place she had played in as a girl, gathering wild berries with her own mother. The journey took 2 hours in darkness. Grace stumbled twice, and Agathe lifted her each time. Agathe carried the infant on her back and guided the grandmother by the hand, feeling the old woman's bones trembling against her palm. Emmanuel walked behind the group, watching for threats in the shadows. They reached the cave before dawn and sealed the entrance with branches and stones, pressing them tight until the gap was invisible. For the next 40 days, they lived in that cave. Agathe brought food every 3rd night, walking the path silently under the stars, leaving bundles of sorghum and beans at the cave mouth. She slept only 2 hours a night, lying flat on her mat in the kitchen, listening for any sound that might betray the secret, a footstep, a voice, the crack of a branch. The militia searched the village repeatedly. They questioned Agathe. They told her she was foolish, even dangerous, for not reporting the Tutsi. She said she had no knowledge of any such people. She wept alone in her bedroom each night, then washed her face with cold water and opened her eyes to another day. On the 68th day, the RPF offensive reached Kibuye. The militia fled in disarray. Agathe emerged from her house and walked into the village square, where she found Emmanuel alive but gaunt, Grace standing unsteadily on her feet for the first time in 2 months, and the grandmother weeping with her hands raised to the sky. The 7 people she had hidden walked out of the bush and into the light of a morning that finally felt safe. Agathe never spoke publicly about what she had done. She returned to her bean field, rebuilt her kitchen, and hung laundry on the same line. Neighbors came and went. The world moved on. But in the root cellar beneath that floor, and in the cave behind the banana grove, 7 people carried the knowledge that one woman's silence and stubbornness had held back a tide of murder. The genocide killed over 800,000 people in 100 days. Agathe saved 7. History did not record her name in any official document, any memorial, any school textbook. But the 7 who survived told their children, and their children told theirs, and somewhere in Kibuye province, a woman's name still lives in the mouths of the families she protected. If Agathe's name was almost erased by history, then every one of us who hears this story becomes the place where it survives. So like this, share it, and tell us in the comments whose name you will carry forward. The clay jug is still on the dirt floor. Scratching has stopped. But the silence she kept, that still holds.